And welcome back. Joining us now is Wiper Party leader. He has many other titles, but I'll just go with that for today. And of course, presidential hopeful Kalonzo Musyoka. Thank you very much for hosting us.
Thank you, Anne, and welcome.
Thank you. Well, I want us to begin with the handshake and the BBI. And critics of this initiative argue that it has divided rather than unite Kenyans. What's your perspective?
I think the critics may have a point, but I think they should give the BBI the advantage. Just give them the benefit of the doubt, because we are at the very initial stages of doing a very important national exercise, that of amendment to our constitution. Itself a result of the Building Bridges initiative. And we must not forget, Anne, that, and the viewers, that building bridges really has a lot to do with the handshake. But since the handshake and the formulation by the two principals of the 9 points that they wanted Kenyans to reflect on, the matter has grown in leaps and bounds. And so the BBI now is out of the hands of both President Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga.
It's taking a life of its own.
A life of its own. So as it takes this life of its own, you're likely to hear a lot of voices. Now when those voices happen, it shouldn't be seen like it's dividing the country. I'm sure there'll be a point of convergence. And the point of convergence, in my view, will be when the question is formulated and then the question is proposed.
So you're clear that it's heading to a referendum? Sorry?
Yeah, I'm actually looking about a referendum. Okay. You cannot avoid a referendum. Okay. It is just a matter of when. But that will have a referendum as a culmination of the effort of the BBI, to me, is an imperative. Having said that, had I been asked, we probably would have started with the technical steering committee doing their work, formulating the question, and then we go to the countryside. Go to the countryside with a question. Now, it looks like we may have to do double work here, because when the referendum question is proposed, again, there will be need maybe to go out again. But I think that will be now the time to unify the country more than, you know, because even as it is now, those critics who think it's dividing the country, I think should also be guided by the fact that this is what actually is the essence of democracy and dialogue. Because we cannot all be talking the same language. Have I not heard that everybody seems to be supportive of BBI, including Tanga? There are those who thought Kieleweke were the ones behind it, and of course those groups are eventually getting out of the scene as well. The BBI has become bigger than Tanga, bigger than BBI, okay, I mean bigger than Kieleweke. Right. And so, ukiona vyaelea, ujue vimeundwa. Right. So there's a process of kuunda. Right. Sasa ndio inaendelea.
But you've talked about the referendum. Do you think the country is ready to have a referendum sometime this year, as has been suggested?
Yeah, we have another, what I call as a constitutional lawyer, a constitutional moment. Remember, in 2010, the church in particular was against the constitution. And some people actually who eventually became beneficiaries of that constitution were opposed to it. But that's not the issue which we want to discuss today. Everybody felt at that time that 80% of a document was okay and 20% needed to be addressed. This is the time to address whatever were the issues, because a constitution is not a static document. It must really be able to give ability. It's a breathing, if you like. Minus, of course, that doesn't have a soul, but it is a document that leads the affairs of men and women in an organized society such as Kenya. What
would you like to see in constitutional change?
Oh, well, it's quite a lot. I have a Wiper Democratic Movement made this presentation. And again, out there, I was actually joined by my two deputy leaders, the Honorable Shakil Abdallah and the Honorable Farah Maalim. Honorable Farah Maalim had his different views. He was talking about a pure parliamentary system like they have in the UK, because in that he sees an opportunity, perhaps in the years to come, where every Kenyan can, you know, come out, if your party is everything, not the personalities, the party, like happened in the debate, the big debate about Brexit in the UK, and the subsequent elections where Prime Minister Boris Johnson won. It was the Conservatives against Labour. And of course the others. There was even a Brexit party.
And what is your own view? Pure parliamentary?
My own view is we would need to look at Boma's draft. We have always stood for Boma's draft. When we were campaigning as NASA, National Super Alliance, we were very clear. We even filed with the Registrar of Political Parties a document, which is a public document, where NASA was saying, had we taken over the leadership of this country, we would then have seen the following in terms of the governance structure. The President, the Deputy President, the Prime Minister, 2 Deputy Premiers. That's exactly what we are now proposing. We propose that. It is a mix where you're going to end up with a situation where members of Parliament can also aspire to become cabinet ministers. And even the very name, cabinet secretary. I mean, even if we had to borrow from the United States, we didn't have to borrow lock, stock, and barrel, including secretaries of state. You know, Secretary of State Pompeo. Now, we're in an African setup, and I do not think there's any country in Africa which refers to the ministers as cabinet secretaries. Kenyans want a distinction between principal secretaries, permanent secretaries, and of course ministers. So an opportunity has now arisen to get parliamentarians who are elected, representatives of the people, also some of them joining cabinet. And if they do, that I think it's very good. We're going to revive question time. Right now, the committees in Parliament, and they have a serious problem with them. Because when those committees vet presidential nominees for the various constitutional offices, instead of Parliament playing that honorable role, and this I think goes to the problem of our ethos, national ethos, and guiding principles, people now use that as an opportunity to get bribed. And we know what has happened.
Parliament has failed.
It's failed in that regard. But if it is that Kenyans are going to see ministers being questioned on the floor of the House during question time, right? Then they will feel, yes, this is a kind of parliament we'd want to see. Yeah, the parliament that we used to have of people like the late Awing Scothek, Martin Shikuku, debaters. We see a parliament, is it the 12th parliament?
Right.
Not 12th. Really very solid in terms of this. We have also made a proposal as WIPA, Democratic Movement, to really get the Senate as the upper house, so that all the bills will originate from the National Assembly, and before they get presidential approval, they have got to go through the Senate. Because the Senate is a smaller body, the Senate has an ability to really go into these things and balance things. Of course, everybody knows that it's their responsibility even to do the question of impeachment. It must go beyond that.
Okay,
so
and
that
we'll return in detail to some of those proposals, but I hear you in terms of accountability of the cabinet, and also, you know, you need that neatness in terms of which house is in charge of what, and that's
right.
fair.
Right now is funny.
Yeah, and we'll return to it. However, if we could just return to BBI, there are claims that this is a process that is actually attempting a backdoor return of President Uhuru Kenyatta in order for him to remain in power. What do you think of that?
I thought I've heard President Uhuru Kenyatta make it very clear. Sometimes I think he gets worked up on this matter, and he thinks people misunderstand him. I'm quite sure with time he might clarify the position. One thing is clear. Under Constitution 2010, and even under the proposals, I've not heard anybody say that we remove the presidential term limit. So President Kenyatta cannot, in 2022 or after 2022, run as President of the Republic of Kenya. That's a fact.
What about in the position of Executive Prime Minister? Now,
Executive Prime Minister, again, what do we mean by Executive Prime Minister? An Executive Prime Minister, in my view, is such as you have again in the UK, where you have a pure parliamentary system. And the BBI 1, which we are all trying to validate, the proposal was that executive power will rest and vest in the president, because the president will remain the head of government and also head of state. as well as the commander-in-chief of our defense forces. Now that is executive power. But you can add staff in the office of the the office of the Prime Minister,
who is in charge of the running of government on a day-to-day basis.
Under BBI1, I think that office is unattractive to anybody. First of all, for Parliament to approve a name is like very difficult. He's not even subject, he cannot even be paid a responsibility allowance. He earns the salary of a normal member of Parliament. So where is the distinction?
But this is what you said on the 30th of January in Athi River. You said, quote, who will prevent Uhuru Kenyatta becoming a prime minister because he will have to be appointed by the president? So in such a scenario, because you have envisaged it, would you think or would you support Uhuru Kenyatta being appointed into that position, as many of his allies have already said is the plan?
Let me tell you, if President Uhuru Kenyatta comes up as the leader of the party or the coalition of parties that wins the next elections in 2022, and then the president will have to appoint a prime. These are made very clear. And in fact, when I spoke about it, we call it not at the river, it was at Komarok, right? People said I was advocating for presidential extension of term limits. They didn't understand. But if the president has to appoint the leader of the party with the majority, and this is a point for discussion. This is a point for discussion. In my view,
what's your opinion? Should
in my opinion, the Prime Minister should be the leader, all right, of the party with the majority in Parliament.
And if that so happens to be Uhuru Kenyatta, you would be okay with that?
Of course, if he's that, I would happily appoint him Prime Minister.
All right.
Yeah.
Would you agree with those who argue that BBI is being used by some, particularly Raila Odinga, to settle political scores with the Deputy President?
You should ask those two gentlemen. I think I would not want to be drawn.
Do you see it that way?
No. I said this BBI thing is now taken a life of its own. And in that conversation, there may be those who mistakenly or rightly think they are the subject. They're the subject of the BBI. I'm sure BBI is bigger than that. And again, the country is bigger than all of us. It's bigger than Raila Odinga. It's bigger than William Ruto. So, in fact, sometimes the media also needs to be put in order because they make it look like this is a contest between the two gentlemen. It is not. And some of us have been watching this with a bit of amazement that, again, is trying to shape a scenario, a debate about two gentlemen.
But you have served as vice president before. Do you sympathize at all with the predicament in which the deputy president finds himself in?
What predicament does he find himself in?
Where it appears that he's being fought by elements in the state.
Well, you see, I was once, for 5 years, President Kibaki's vice president. And there's very little distinction between, and in fact, it's just the analogy, you use the word deputy instead of vice. Perhaps we should even reverse to the vice president because on a lighter note, for as long as we continue with deputy president, then I think Kenyans should take note, I'm always the vice president because there's not been another one.
But do you sympathize with the deputy president?
I don't think it's a matter of sympathy or lack of it. It is just a reality. This is real politics. When you are a heartbeat away from the presidency, then you're likely to get stones thrown at you. If that happens, you should take it in stride, right? But also recognize, and this is where the problem perhaps is, if you like the punchline here, is it looks like there's a disconnect between the deputy president and his boss. Because I never allowed a situation when I was Kibaki's vice president for President Kibaki to imagine that the vice president is not reading from the same script with him. Although, again, he was a leader of his own party and I was actually a coalition partner, appointed, but actually a leader of my own party. But then having gotten to that situation, I think the roles were clearly defined.
So would you say that it's a problem of his own making, that he has
I don't want to pass judgment.
Kenyatta?
I would not pass judgment on the deputy president. Neither would I blame the president, the country, whoever has been watching, and the country can realize there are issues, there are serious issues.
If you were him, what would you do?
Go and talk to the president.
Wow.
Sort it out. Yeah. But of course, there could be other underlying considerations. Look at the issue about the fight against corruption. This, I think, is important. And you seem to be dealing with a president who has decided that as the low-lying fruit, the fight against corruption is achievable, is doable. And that's why some of us actually came out of our trenches and said, rather than fight President Uhuru, Muigai Kenyatta, we want to support him in this fight against corruption. Right. If you watch my remarks in Meru, because DCI Kinoti is actually a man from Meru, I was able to pour a lot of praise on him because he's fearless. He's fearless. Now, when that happens, and maybe the deputy president rightly or wrongly thinks is a subject of this discussion about corruption, then I think he would do well. He would do well to support the president.
All right, and
in this fight, because it's a ticket. You know, the two of them are tied to the hip and to the next election. Okay, we're just about to go to break, but before we do that, at one point it was speculated that you were keen to enter a pre-2022 alliance with the deputy president. What is your position on that? Who was that? It was speculated that you were willing to enter a pre-election and at my level, I cannot deal with speculation. I would like to imagine Kenyans by now have come to realize that we say what we mean and mean what we say. Or you send out feelers to the public using some of your close allies, for instance, Johnson Musyoka. I don't know who's a close ally. Who is a close ally? In fact, Johnson Musyoka caused me a lot of pain. I had to disagree with him plainly, openly. Because sometimes a friend, you can differ with a friend and tell them straight to their face. And that's what I did with Johnson Musyoka. He may not have agreed with him, but I told him. Because it comes to a time when you must put things in perspective. I have made it plainly, I have made it very plain, even at a very solemn occasion, like the burial of my late father, that I'm going to work with President Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta. Right. Okay? Now that is very clear. Anything that is seen to be diversionary cannot belong to me. And so this is as clear as can be. All right, we're taking a break. When we return with Honorable Kalonzo Musyoka, we're talking about his presidential ambitions. Do they still exist? And a little bit of Ukambani politics as well as the war on corruption. Stay with us.